In 1993, Menace II society shocked the world with its raw, unfiltered look at street life. But by 2025, the truth about the cast has become even darker than the film itself. Some fell into the depths of addiction. Others battled heart disease, lung problems, and crippling joint pain. And a few grew so old and frail, they could only survive with constant assistance. Join us as we uncover who they really are today, and honor the legacies they left behind. Tyrin Turner, as Kane Lawson. Tyrin Turner was born on July 13, 1971, in Los Angeles, California. At 22 years old, he played Kane Lawson in Menace II Society, 1993, embodying a young man trapped between violence and survival. His performance carried the film's emotional weight, making Kane one of the most iconic tragic figures in 1990s cinema. But the breakout that should have secured his future slowly became the beginning of his struggle. Turner's marriage fell apart during the years he waited for his next big role, and the custody battle that followed left him emotionally drained and financially unsteady. That pain crept into his work, and as Hollywood turned its attention to newer faces, he felt the industry slipping away from him. Even while appearing in Belly, 1998, and later Meet the Blacks, the pressure of rebuilding both career and family often overwhelmed him. As the disappointment grew, Turner's mental health began to waver. The frustration of being overlooked, combined with the wounds from his broken marriage, pushed him into anxiety and depression. Therapy eventually helped him regain balance, and writing comedy material for Jamie Foxx and Affion Crockett gave him a quiet path back into the industry. Now, Tyrin Turner is 53 years old, continuing to act, write, and tour with stage productions like Jason's Lyric Live while raising his twins. His estimated $2 million net worth reflects a career built not from consistent stardom, but from persistence, survival, and the determination to remain present in an industry that once left him behind. Samuel L. Jackson as Tat Lawson. Samuel L. Jackson was born on December 21, 1948, in Washington, D.C. At 44 years old, Jackson played Tat Lawson in Menace II Society, 1993, embodying a volatile father whose reckless violence shaped the film's emotional darkness. His presence became a crucial spark that pushed Kane deeper into a world he could not escape. But while he played chaos on screen, the turmoil in his private life ran even deeper. Jackson's marriage to LaTanya Richardson, once steady and hopeful, began to fracture under the weight of his addiction. Long nights lost to cocaine and heroin, missed commitments, and emotional distance pulled their relationship into constant conflict. Each argument followed him onto set, and even as Pulp Fiction lifted his career, the strain at home made success feel painfully hollow. As he fought to save his marriage, Jackson also fought to save his own life. Rehab forced him to confront the damage he had caused, but rebuilding trust with LaTanya required patience and painful honesty. His body revealed the cost of those years. Heart problems eventually demanded a pacemaker. The marriage endured, but only because both of them chose to stay when leaving would have been easier. Today, Samuel L. Jackson is 76 years old, still working, still standing, and still refusing to slow down. He continues acting and supporting charitable programs with LaTanya, proving that survival is his true legacy. His estimated $250 million net worth only underscores how far he has come from the days when addiction threatened to erase everything. Larenz Tate, as O-Dog. Larenz Tate was born on September 8, 1975, in Chicago, Illinois. At 20 years old, he played O-Dog in Menace II Society, 1993, delivering a performance so explosive that his character became the film's most feared symbol of youth and violence. His role brought raw intensity to every scene, instantly marking him as one of the most compelling young actors of his generation. But moving beyond that iconic gangster image proved far harder than he expected. Tate's transition into dramatic leading roles came with heavy pressure. And when several films underperformed, the financial strain quietly crept into his life. Even with the stability of his marriage to Thomasina Perrott, the loss of loved ones and his own encounters with racial bias in Hollywood left him emotionally bruised. Each setback tested his resilience as he worked through projects like Love Jones and later, the Power franchise. Despite the difficulties, Tate pushed forward while carrying the weight of personal grief and industry challenges. The frustration of being typecast lingered, and balancing rising expectations with the demands of fatherhood forced him into long periods of self-reflection. Still, he continued working, turning pain into fuel as he moved into producing roles and using his platform to support sickle cell awareness. Today, Larenz Tate is 50 years old, still acting steadily in film and television while raising 4 children with Thomasina. His estimated $4.5 million net worth reflects decades of dedication, discipline, and the determination to carve out a place in Hollywood on his own terms, long after O-Dog first set his life in motion. Arnold Johnson as Grandpa. Arnold Johnson was born on November 15, 1921, in New York City. At 71 years old, Johnson played Grandpa Thomas in Menace 2 Society, 1993, bringing a quiet, moral strength to the story as a grandfather desperately trying to save Kane from a violent path. His performance carried a depth shaped by a life that had known its own share of struggle. That struggle began inside his own home. Johnson's marriage had collapsed years earlier, leaving him to raise his children alone while trying to survive on small acting roles. The pressure of providing on an unstable income wore him down emotionally, pulling him into long periods of depression. Even appearances in Putney Swope, Shaft, and Rocky could not mask the loneliness that settled into his life after the marriage ended. As the years passed, emotional burden soon turned into physical decline. Diabetes crept into his life, followed by heart complications that drained his energy and made work exhausting. By the time he filmed Menace 2 Society, he was fighting fatigue, pain, and the quiet fear that his body was failing faster than his career could support him. Sadly, Arnold Johnson died on April 10, 2000, in Los Angeles, at 78 years old, from renal failure caused by years of diabetes and heart disease. At the time of his passing, his net worth was about $500,000, the modest result of a lifetime devoted to work that rarely gave him the recognition he deserved. Jada Pinkett Smith as Ronnie. Jada Pinkett Smith was born on September 18, 1971, in Baltimore, Maryland. At 21 years old, she played Ronnie in Menace 2 Society, 1993, portraying a young mother whose resilience and tenderness offered Kane a brief glimpse of stability. Her character softened the film's harshness, but outside the screen, Jada's own life soon became far more turbulent. Her marriage to Will Smith, which began in 1997, slowly filled with fractures as pressure from fame, comparisons to her husband's success, and emotional distance settled between them. The breaking point came with the 2016 entanglement scandal, when her relationship with August Alsina ignited worldwide controversy. The fallout strained her marriage deeply, and even as she worked on The Matrix Reloaded and later Girls Trip, the tension at home shadowed every achievement. The turmoil did not stop there. Years of stress collided with her battle against alopecia, which surfaced publicly in 2018 and forced her to shave her head after months of emotional pain and failed treatments. Each appearance, in interviews, in red table talk, or on red carpets, carried the weight of vulnerability she could no longer hide. And when the Oscar slap in 2022 tied her name to yet another scandal, the marriage came under even greater pressure, revealing that she and Will had quietly lived separate lives since 2016. Now, Jada Pinkett Smith is 54 years old, still working as an actress, producer, and author while maintaining her public platform. She continues managing her health, raising her children, and navigating a marriage that remains separated but not dissolved. Her estimated $50 million net worth reflects decades of acting, producing, and entrepreneurship. Saafir as Harold Saafir, born Reggie Gibson on August 23, 1970 in Oakland, California, entered Menace II Society, 1993, at 23 years old, playing Harold Lawson, whose brutal death early in the film became one of the story's most shocking turning points. His brief role added intensity to the narrative, yet his real life carried even heavier battles. Saafir's marriage collapsed under the strain of financial pressure, disputes over custody, and the growing shadow of substance abuse. The constant competition within the West Coast hip-hop scene pushed him into deeper instability, especially as his albums struggled commercially. Even as he created boxcar sessions and collaborated with major artists, the chaos inside his home and within himself left him exhausted and increasingly isolated. His health soon followed the same downward spiral. A devastating spinal tumor, complications from a 1992 plane accident, and years of addiction placed him in a wheelchair. The physical pain grew unbearable, and by 2022 he was diagnosed with late-stage lung cancer. The illness advanced quickly, leaving him battling infections, weakness, and a body that was failing faster than medical care could save it. Finally, Saafir died on November 19, 2024, at 54 years old, passing peacefully at 8:45 a.m. beside family and friends. The cause of death was sepsis and colitis, worsened by invasive spinal infections and his final fight with cancer. At the time of his passing, his net worth was estimated at $1 million, earned through rap, small acting roles, and a legacy cherished by underground hip-hop fans. Charles S. Dutton as Mr. Butler. Charles S. Dutton was born on January 30, 1951, in Baltimore, Maryland. At 41 years old, he played Mr. Butler in Menace II Society, 1993, portraying a strict but compassionate mentor who desperately tries to steer troubled youth away from the path he once walked himself. His brief role carried quiet authority, shaped by the weight of a man who understood consequences too well. But behind the camera, Dutton faced battles even harsher than the ones his character warned about. His early life unraveled through violence, arrests, and 2 long prison terms that left him struggling to rebuild a future. When he tried to return to normal life, the stigma of incarceration followed him into every room, poisoning job opportunities and pushing him into painful cycles of rejection. That instability seeped into his marriages, 4 unions that began with hope but collapsed under pressure, including his short and highly publicized marriage to actress Debbie Morgan. As he climbed out of the shadows, Dutton poured himself into acting, but the toll of his past never fully loosened its grip. Years of stress, poor diet, and the emotional weight of failed relationships contributed to a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes in 2000, forcing him into strict, lifelong management. Even as he earned acclaim for Rock and the Piano Lesson, collecting Emmy Awards and a Tony, the private battles he carried made each victory feel both triumphant and painfully hard-won. Now Charles S. Dutton is 74 years old, still working in film and theater while directing projects that reflect the struggles he overcame. He manages his diabetes carefully, stays active, and uses his platform to advocate for rehabilitation programs. His estimated $4 million net worth represents decades of work, redemption, and the resilience of a man who refused to let his past define his future. Bill Duke as detective. Bill Duke was born on February 26, 1943, in Poughkeepsie, New York. At 50 years old, he played the detective in Menace II Society, 1993, delivering the cold, calculated interrogation scene that became one of the film's most iconic moments. His character's calm brutality set a tone of dread that echoed long after the scene ended. But away from the spotlight, Duke's life was marked by a different kind of pressure. His directing career grew in an industry where racial bias was constant, and the strain of watching projects collapse under discrimination carved deep frustration into his personal life. Though his marriage to Sheila Moses brought stability beginning in 2005, the couple endured heartbreak when they lost their son in an accident. As the years moved forward, the stress of activism, directing, and grief took a toll on his health. In 2015, Duke was diagnosed with prostate disease, a frightening moment that forced him into treatment and recovery while he continued balancing work and mourning. Even as he appeared in classics like Predator and directed award-winning films, he carried the silent weight of loss and the determination to keep moving. Today, Bill Duke is 82 years old, still acting, still directing, and still mentoring young filmmakers through programs he helped create. He continues managing his health carefully and remains active in the industry that once tried to push him aside. His estimated $3 million net worth reflects a lifetime of work across acting, directing, and producing. Glenn Plummer as Purnell. Glenn Plummer was born on August 18, 1961, in Richmond, California. At 31 years old, he played Purnell in Menace II Society, 1993, portraying a man trapped between loyalty and destruction whose choices quietly shaped the film's emotional stakes. His grounded intensity made Purnell a haunting presence despite limited screen time. But away from the set, Plummer's own life soon began unraveling. Years of cocaine addiction cost him major roles and pushed him into a cycle of stress, failed auditions, and financial strain. The pressure bled into his personal life, and when his first marriage collapsed, the heartbreak left him emotionally hollow. His second marriage followed the same painful path, closing another chapter marked by disappointment and emotional exhaustion. As his relationships fell apart, Plummer fought to rebuild himself. He entered rehab and successfully overcame his addiction in 2000, but the recovery came with its own battles, memories he preferred to keep buried, and career opportunities that never fully returned. Even as he worked on films like Speed, 1994, and The Day After Tomorrow, 2004, he carried the quiet ache of someone who had rebuilt everything from the ruins of his past. Now, Glenn Plummer is 64 years old, still acting, producing independent films, and appearing in smaller television roles. His estimated $1.5 million net worth reflects decades of persistence rather than uninterrupted success. Clifton Powell as Chauncey. Clifton Powell was born on March 16, 1956, in Washington, D.C. At 36 years old, he played Chauncey in Menace II Society, 1993, giving the film a sly, unpredictable edge through a character driven by jealousy and betrayal. His performance made Chauncey one of the most memorable supporting figures in the story. But behind the roles, Powell's life was filled with complicated tension. As the years passed, he found himself repeatedly cast in secondary parts, and the lack of leading roles created constant financial pressure. Even with the steady support of his wife, Kimberly, the emotional weight of being typecast deepened his insecurity. Those moments of turmoil lingered quietly behind his work, surfacing whenever career momentum stalled. Despite the challenges, he continued to push forward. The struggle to balance personal stability with professional frustration often left him drained, yet he kept acting in films like Next Friday and Ray, hoping each performance might open a new door. Today, Clifton Powell is 69 years old, still acting regularly and taking on supporting roles in film and television while maintaining a quieter personal life with his wife. His estimated $500,000 net worth reflects a lifetime of steady but demanding work. Khandi Alexander as Karen Lawson. Khandi Alexander was born on September 4, 1957, in Jacksonville, Florida. At 35 years old, she played Karen Lawson in Menace II Society, 1993, offering a brief but essential presence as the grieving aunt trying to hold a collapsing family together. Her calm but heavy performance added humanity to a world defined by violence. After that role, her life moved through far more turbulent paths. Years of being cast in supporting characters created constant pressure, and the sexism she encountered on set often left her feeling invisible, despite her talent. It added depth to roles in CSY Miami and Tree Me, but it also took an emotional toll that only those close to her fully understood. As she matured, Alexander continued pushing past the limitations Hollywood placed on older women of color. The chronic joint problems she developed in 2010 made long days on set painful, but she refused to step back, returning again and again with the same fierce discipline that had carried her since her early days as a dancer. By 2025, Khandi Alexander is 68 years old, still working selectively and focusing on voice acting and guest roles that allow her to manage her health. Her estimated $8 million net worth reflects a long career built through resilience and consistency. MC Eiht, as A-Wax MC Eiht, was born on May 22, 1967, in Compton, California. At 26 years old, he played A-Wax in Menace II Society, 1993, creating one of the film's most iconic figures, a cold, calculating survivor shaped by the streets that raised him. His performance captured the quiet brutality of gang culture with a realism few could imitate. But behind the tough exterior, his real life carried its own wounds. Years of gang violence, constant feuds within West Coast hip-hop, and the exhausting rivalry with DJ Quick created a level of tension that followed him everywhere. Even with a stable marriage, Eiht struggled with the emotional fallout of losing close friends and family members to street violence. As time passed, he gradually stepped away from the destructive environment he grew up in. The stress of the industry, the pressure to maintain a hard image, and the fatigue from decades of conflict pushed him toward quieter choices. His later albums reflected a man trying to preserve his life rather than defend his reputation. Acting roles and collaborations helped him stay afloat, but he moved through each project with the memory of the streets shaping every decision. Today, MC Eiht is 58 years old, still recording selectively and performing at West Coast nostalgic tours while focusing on mentoring younger artists. His estimated $2 million net worth reflects a lifetime balancing survival, music, and hard-earned maturity. Vonte Sweet, as Sharif Butler. Vonte Sweet was born in 1971 in the United States. At 21 years old, he played Sharif Butler in Menace II Society, 1993, portraying the reformed Muslim friend whose calm morality contrasted sharply with the film's violent chaos. His performance earned quiet respect, even though his role was brief. After that early success, his career slowed abruptly, and the financial stress began tightening around his life. With fewer roles coming in, he shouldered the heavy burden of supporting his family while trying to remain visible in an industry that quickly forgets its young talent. When his marriage collapsed, the pressure doubled: custody battles, emotional exhaustion, and the responsibility of raising his child alone left him drained long before Hollywood stopped calling his name. That emotional weight soon seeped into his work. Although he found small appearances, including his earlier work in Boys in the Hood, the lack of stability kept him constantly anxious about the future. The line between surviving and pursuing his craft became thinner each year. By 2025, Vonte Sweet is 53 years old, working quietly behind the scenes and taking occasional acting jobs to stay afloat. His estimated $300,000 net worth reflects a modest but hard-earned life, built not on fame, but on resilience, responsibility, and the determination to keep going, even after the spotlight faded. Too Short as Lulock. Too Short was born on April 28, 1966, in Los Angeles, California. At 27 years old, he played Lulock in Menace II Society, 1993, bringing a sharp, streetwise presence that mirrored the gritty reality of his music. His role captured the swagger and survival instincts that defined West Coast hip-hop at the time. But as his popularity rose, so did the pressure and the controversies. The explicit lyrics that made him famous also sparked lawsuits, public criticism, and constant scrutiny that followed him from city to city. Through those turbulent years, his music remained both an outlet and a battlefield. While life is too short cemented him as a pioneer, the fight to stay relevant took a toll. The emotional strain of burying close friends, the exhaustion from touring, and the constant pressure to protect his reputation left scars that no award could erase. Even success forced a price. By 2025, Too Short is 59 years old, still performing, still recording, and still mentoring young artists. His estimated $15 million net worth reflects a long, relentless career built on survival as much as talent. Toshi Toda as grocery store man. Toshi Toda was born in 1943 in Japan. At 50 years old, he played the grocery store man in Menace to Society, 1993, portraying the fearful shopkeeper caught in a robbery that spirals out of control. His brief role carried a memorable tension that reflected the film's raw emotional violence. After that appearance, Toda's professional path became increasingly difficult. Hollywood's limited opportunities for Asian actors forced him into a cycle of small background roles, each one reminding him of the ceiling he was never allowed to break. Even with a stable marriage supporting him through long stretches of uncertainty, the pressure of constantly being typecast left him questioning whether his dedication would ever be rewarded. As the years passed, the strain took a physical toll. The long hours on set, combined with the emotional frustration of fighting stereotyping, weighed heavily on him. Age-related arthritis began affecting his mobility, making each role harder to complete and each audition more painful. Despite these setbacks, he pushed forward, appearing in films like Don't Be a Menace and Pearl Harbor, determined to stay visible in an industry that often overlooked him. By 2025, Toshi Toda is 82 years old, living quietly and accepting only occasional work suited to his health. His estimated $1 million net worth reflects decades of perseverance rather than fame, proof of a man who stayed committed to his craft even when the world made that commitment nearly impossible. So now you've seen the rise, the fall, and the heartbreaking reality behind the cast of Menace to Society. But which story shocked you the most? And who do you think went through the toughest journey? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more untold stories from Hollywood's forgotten legends.